welcome to Walker Tea Review. I'm Jason Walker, and one of the things we're doing here at Walker Tea Review, or I'm doing here, is really explaining and kind of introducing tea and tea quality. So if you're coming here to do that, we've got a tea that you may be interested in knowing more about. If you go on Twitter and you run a search for words like Dragonwell or Longjing, that's Longjing, there's a lot of people talking about this kind of tea, so you may be wondering, well, what is it? How do I choose it? What does a good Longjing or Dragonwell look like? So we've got one in front of us today, so we'll be able to talk about some of those things as we go along. This is a smallish sample, so I've got my tea equipment that I'm going to be using. I'm going to try to use a smaller, this is called a Gaiwan. I'm going to use a smaller Gaiwan. This is about, I'm going to say this is about 3 to 3.5 ounces for the size, which should give me enough that I can use or I'm going to make a smaller steep really. I've got my tea kettle, but water's been brought to a very low/early boil, and then it's been allowed to cool. So I've got my Longjing, and this is I'm going to be introducing this in just a minute rather. And what you're going to see is the general rule is with a Gaiwan or something like this, to really kind of test this tea out, I put in enough that covers the bottom of the bowl here. Now, if you were to put that in a regular teaspoon, that would be about a teaspoon to teaspoon and a half. That looks like a good amount right there. I do want to have enough to talk about the dry leaf, so I want to set that aside for just a moment. Add my water. I want my water to kind of swirl around so that it really coats the leaves. There's no dry leaf surface floating on the top of the water. And I actually want just a wee bit more because I want to be able to put the lid on and have a little bit of water resting over the top of the lid, which I think I'm going to have as well. Yes, that looks good. Just a little bit of water resting above the rim of the lid. Now I can slide this over. Now let's talk a little bit about this tea and Dragonwells in general. Okay, this tea is from GrandTea. This is their XiHu. XiHu means West Lake. West Lake is the area of Zhejiang province, roughly just outside of Shanghai on the east coast of China, which is the the ancestral home, you could say, of Dragonwell green teas. This is their XiHuPremiumDragonwell, 100 grams, available currently for $6.80. One of the things that we're going to be talking about when we really explore Dragonwells, a couple of things you're going to be looking for. There are different grades of Dragonwell, so you can get slight variations in color and or quality of the Dragonwell. So some of the things you want to look for are generally speaking, you want to look for earlier harvest, which would mean lighter, pale, bright green colors. Avoid yellows, avoid browns, because those are either signs of aging, so it could be last year's harvest, or it is a sign that a little too much pan searing has gone on, and these are actually been a little bit scorched in the pan as they've been seared, as they've been treated, processed. So avoid that. The other thing you want to look for is shape. A shape of a grasshopper leaf is one of the things, terms that's used to describe. Flat, press flat, so that it is long and kind of feather shape. Like I said, grasshopper wing, those are the kind of shapes, the general shape of a leaf. You will often see more than one leaf, so these are tender, and it's usually 2 leaf in a bud type settings, pressed flat. Okay. Other things you're going to be noting as we're going to be talking also about dry leaf, so let's go ahead and kind of talk about this dry leaf for just a moment. You're going to be noticing with a fresh, keen Dragonwell, you're going to be getting toasted notes. Some people will say a light cashew. My nose picks up more of a fresh, like a jasmine, steamed rice type of note. Jasmine rice, steamed jasmine rice, or a Thai rice kind of smell. There is something kind of grainy in that, in a grain or nut about that. You will get some. You might get some slight lemon zest type notes. And this particular one, I'm also getting. I shouldn't say also, but I am getting kind of a boiled cabbage type note. Okay, this one also, just by the smell, this is a more mature leaf. It smells like it doesn't smell as like I said, doesn't have as much of that rice note. Doesn't have as much of a sweet green vegetable type note. This one's a little bit more subdued in that, like I said, a cabbage, a little bit more of an aged type of, more mature. Actually, it acts like it's got a little more age on it, actually, than say some of the higher grades. But this one's not labeled as the highest grade. GrandTea does have higher grades. We actually looked at one of their. I actually looked at one of their Yunqi, which was quite nice. Was actually a high scoring tea in its quality. Now, looking at the dry leaf, you are seeing a couple things. Once in a while, you could see a leaf that has some fuzz on it, like a thick clump of fuzz, which I have here, and I'm going to try to put that so that you'll be able to see that as well. But not sometimes that is supposed to give an indication that this is a fresh tea, a young tea leaf that still has some of that fuzz on it. This one just looks kind of confusing with that. Other things to note, you do have, like I said, longer pressed. This one's here, we got an inch or so. You're getting colors that are a deeper green than some of the others. They are a richer green. So it's not as pale as some of the others. But again, on the other side, not a lot of yellowing, not a lot of age appearing. I mean, like this has been sitting around for a long time either. So yeah, this is just kind of a this is looking like a middle grade, not one of the upper middle grades of quality here, which so far is consistent with its labeling. Okay, now we're going to go on and talk a little bit about our wet leaf in just a moment. So let's go and get ready to pour. If you've come here for skill development in the area of pouring or using a gaiwan, this can be useful as well, because we're going to be getting out our towel just to catch any drips. I've got my steeping pitcher here, fairness cup, sometimes referred to. I'm going to take my lid, I'm going to angle it over to the side. I'm going to put my middle finger and thumb on the rim, hold it down with my index finger, and we're going to pour pretty swiftly to avoid drips. Now I used a water that was, I would say, acceptable in temperature. Could have been a little cooler, but and steep time I could have shortened it a little bit, but I did want to give a good thorough steeping to bring out both the strengths and the weaknesses of the tea. So that is why I may be steeping longer than you. On the other hand, I do like my teas stronger. I like a good depth of strength, of taste, of aroma. So that's one of the and textures there as well. So we'll be talking about that in just a moment. Let's go on to our wet leaf here. Okay, now the aromas in the wet leaf have really come alive. They show that this tea is showing a better quality of this tea. There is a bit of there is a sweetness in the green here that's something close to spinach, perhaps a little bit of a spinach / asparagus in there, a nice fresh tender asparagus in there, and those are the two dominant. If there's any nuttiness, it's kind of mild. It's closer to a pine nut. Okay. Well, let's look at these leaves as they've unfurled here. Now remember, we said we wanted to look for leaf bud sets. Here you do have, for example, let's get this one out because this is good. You got a leaf, another leaf over here, and a tip or bud there. So we've got a good that's a good standard to look at. Our leaves are bright and green. Medium in size. These are not the tenderest. Because the earliest bud, the leaf and tip sets, the leaf and the tips. So you've got the tip, the bud there, and just coming off the corner, the edge, the tip, the base of that bud, you've got another leaf. So that is the very tenderest, earliest. So you've got a leaf that opens up, creates a leaf. Or sorry, a bud opens up, creates a leaf. Opens up a little more, creates another leaf. That the closer they are compared to this one, where you have tip, leaf, more separation there, older, later, a little bit later in the harvest, not the earliest, very first harvest is what this is indicating. Although on the other hand, here you do have some tips with a bud that has sprung right, or a leaf that has sprung right off of that tip or that bud there. So that's a positive worth noting. More of the same, so I'm not going to delve into that much more than what's been said already. Those are two good representative. They're healthy, but they also show that there's a little bit, these were not the very first harvest. Okay, now for our liquor. We have a nice, we've got a golden color there. A newer harvest has a paler color. This one is a little bit more yellow in its color. So this also is another indication this is a later, slightly later harvest. I'm not saying this is extremely late. The advantage of slightly later harvest is that it does have a stronger aroma. So as we said, it has a paler liquor. Earlier harvest has paler liquor, more subtle aromas. This one's a little bit stronger. So if you feel that some green teas are too weak, you may want to start with something a little bit later, not that freshest, earliest pre-Mingqian type harvest. This could be something that you want to look at. Aromas here, they are getting a little bit of a slight, like I said, pine nut, a little bit of boiled green bean coming off here. So those are the dominant notes there. Let's give it a shot here. Thicker broth than say a earlier harvest. It's got some astringency to it, but it's not off-putting. The astringency with the brothiness gives us a kind of coating on the mouth. So on the back and sides of your mouth, there's a lot of watery, juicy type feel. In the front, it's dry and it's drier feeling. So it almost feels like the moisture has just been squeegeed off of your tongue on the front. But it's juicy in the back. So those two kind of complement each other. The aromas, you're getting a little bit of a nutty, or like I said, a Thai or a jasmine, fragrant rice type of note there. So there is some of that component. A little bit of the green bean, and maybe a pinch of that asparagus that we mentioned before. So, looking at this tea overall, it's not marketed as the earliest, freshest harvest, so you can't compare it to that. Looking at this tea overall, based on what it says it's supposed to be and what it is, I'm going to give this tea an 89. It has a little bit flat, dull aroma coming off of the dry leaf. But when you get to the wet leaf, it picks up, it gets a little bit richer. You see that these leaves are a little bit it looks to be a later harvest, and that's what it doesn't claim to be the earliest, freshest type. I mean, the earliest, I should say the earliest. It is fresh. I don't want to confuse that. The liquor, a little bit, like I said, a little bit richer, a little bit darker. It's got a good broth feel on it. The tastes are there. I mean, it's got some astringency that balances well with the juiciness of the back, that wateriness. The aroma, the tastes are there as well. We talked about. So, if this is a tea that if you want to get introduced to a Dragonwell, come here. And as you want to move on towards levels of greater subtlety, refinement, move on to some of other Dragonwell's, GrandTea's offerings. And we looked at this together here.